As Nigel clearly said, my background is highly diverse in the sense of not only that we like the experiment in architecture, but that also we have always liked to rethink of what the position is of the architect. And today, as promised, I was asked to talk about work. How do we gonna work in the future? What is working gonna mean for the architect? How is the architect working? And I thought that maybe I start by describing my own experiments around the way how we believe that the profession is going to change and go in another direction than we used to work in a quite linear manner. Maybe for that reason we have been always been fascinated in the idea of a united network studio. We love to network, we love to collaborate, we love to invite artists, we love to invite fashion designers, we love to invite movie makers to the studio in order to discuss if that what we are doing is right. But let's talk a little bit about the different scales of information of how we bring architecture together. Like in the earlier days, there was maybe the idea of the cooperative model or the way how we could collaborate. That was maybe also the idea of UN Studio, as I said. But today we are slowly moving from what we call a network practice towards a knowledge-based practice. And it's, of course, coming all out of the world of the Internet of Things. So how is the architect going to communicate differently in the future is my question I raise for the way how we will work in the future. I do believe that there is a future where even co-creation could be part of the way how we design. Not that everyone in the net can work together with us and work on the design together with us, but I believe in the sharing of knowledge with others. Whenever you have a topic around, for instance, sustainability or social sustainability, others can maybe help you to support your ideas. For that reason, we have set it up in the studio knowledge communities, as we call them. They are connected to topics around new materials or new computational techniques where we work with, new production techniques. We have worked within another platform around new typological organizational principles, like what we're not going to do in the work environment in the future alone, but also how is it that we're going to live in the future? But whenever you come into UN Studio, you're never going to be invited as an architect alone anymore. You're going to be invited to be part of one of these communities. And you will, over the times, when you are in the studio, let me see, then I don't think this is working. No, then you will be in one of the platforms, and then over the time, if you're not happy in the platform where you are, you can be moving to another platform. So that in the circle of learning, that you then might, over the years, establish for yourself an expertise where you are happy with to develop within the practice. And then this expertise can be cross-virtualized with, of course, your other specialists within the studio, and with that, we hope to be a smarter and more directer and more open in the way how we can hopefully keep on innovating. So from the classical model of the collaborative strategy, of the way how things are changing towards the co-creation model, is something where we are interested in. We have been lately also going online. We want to communicate with the outside world and post with others about our ideas, as I explained. But the key is the idea of how we inform ourselves through a certain form of control, of course, because we need to control the design, we need to control the quality of the way how we work with our specialists around the clients, the specialists we work with. But as I have experienced over the last 15 years, the profession has been expanded so fast and so unbelievable widespread that new forms of control, new concepts of control are maybe the most interesting ways of how we can bring different skills of information together. And I've grouped them always in a very brutal way in two parts. So you have on the one side the more technological, call it the scientific side of the architecture, what needs to be further expanded, and of course we have the cultural side of architecture. And as we know, the cultural side of architecture has been expanded too. We now can refer to literature, we can refer, like I said, to fashion, we can refer to many other cultural qualities in architecture. But lately I discovered if you want to get these cultural effects in architecture, spatially organized and well built, then of course the scientific or the technological side needs to be further expanded too. And I will talk about that later on. Like here, maybe talking a bit about the way how scientists were walking and talking and sitting together while they were in the cafe. This is in this case the cafe in Vienna, the Greenstyle cafe, where amongst Freud and some of his friends, scientists would talk to the artist, like Klimt and Schindler or other artists involved, to talk about the latest theories. But this idea of the local salon and the way how engineering, the idea around science and engineering the way of how the artists were thinking about the future portraits was of course all be related to this local salon. But today we are in a much more global salon. Today we can communicate much more wider and far more integral, and it is spread over so many cultures that this model can be further expanded, like our profession. And maybe in the same time, a painter like Egon Schiele was interested in the ideas of Freud, for instance. I mean, he was actually criticizing the ideas of Freud. He was arguing that Freud was not so up to date about his theory of women, for instance. Klimt and Egon Schiele were critical of the theory because they were saying, yeah, we paint much more women than you ever experienced in your life. So for that they were rethinking the portrait and the image of the people they were painting. In this case, this is a self-portrait of Egon Schiele. And whenever we are thinking about the way how information comes together, in this case, maybe social codes, ideas of the character, here they're characterized in the hands. So the way you can read the character is more to be experienced maybe in the hands than in the face. So the portrait is to be found in the hands. And this idea of the way how architecture is composed and comes together maybe in the idea of bigger details has been always my interest. So how do we group knowledge? How do we distribute knowledge? How can we select knowledge? How can we canalize knowledge? Is the way how I think we need to think about the future of the way how we design in a way that it is done over the bigger detail. Like in this case, this is an earlier project whereby the ceiling is almost doing the whole project, the whole job of the project, whereby the ceiling brings you to the upper floor of this museum. It's a mirror of the landscape around the project. It's a topological mirror. It is playing with the idea that it is a blanket going over all the technical requirements of the museum, and it plays with the idea of the way how it guides you through the whole museum. So it's also a kind of wayfinding element, as you can see here. The second big in detail is the stair, because it's a stair within a stair within a stair. You can meet in the stair, you can find the different programs in the building through the stair. You can sit on the stair. The stair is actually helping to support you to find the different entities in the building, together with the ceiling. So these two elements do the whole project, or make the whole project. Like maybe in an earlier work, the Möbius house did. The Möbius house consisted of two materials, maybe only, glass and concrete. Like the Möbius structure, it goes from the outside towards the inside. When the parents are in the living room, they wanted to have a contact with the family, like the kids, sorry. But they didn't want to hear them. So they thought when they come home late, then they can wave to us and they go maybe nice to bed, but at least we have a contact, but maybe we don't have to see them. Or another example of the notion of the bigger detail is this idea of the reflection of the mirror quality of this house. It was for a client in upstate New York. The client was interested in gold, as you can maybe see a little bit in this project. So we used this as a bit a kind of play of his personal interest. And in a way, this building became for him the self-portrait of the way how he lived, how he wanted to live with the landscape, and how the landscape could move over from the way how he would work in the house and live in the house with the landscape. But for me, the most important is that through knowledge and through the way how we bring these projects together, that this idea of the layers of knowledge is also experienced in the layers of the experience of the architecture. Like, this house is not built out of a one-off idea. It's made with the idea that it creates an after-image, so that whenever you leave the house, then you will have an afterthought, and maybe you'd like to come back to the thought. And hopefully it works like a good book, where you have many afterthoughts around the way how you have been reading the book and like to go back to the book. So similarly, this house creates a lot of after-images. And it creates moments of social cohesion there, where a staircase and a view to the outside of the landscape is melting the family together. But there where you'd like to separate and go to the more orthogonal aspect of the house, you can separate and seclude yourself from the family experience. But let me go back to this phenomenon of the bigger detail. I've always been fascinated in the idea of how we can make certain projects work, let them work, through the idea of the larger detail. But in this case, this void space in the Mercedes-Benz Museum was not possible without this smoke detector system. It is a tornado that can be introduced whenever there is a fire in the building. So the smoke can be sucked out of the building in 5 minutes. And this is quite an unusual invention, and I was not the only person who was inventing this idea, but it were all the specialists connected to this idea that we wanted to do a total open museum with total open floors, with a total transparency to the way how the public could see each other within the project. So with this we could already in 2006 reduce down all the fire code systems within the project. So no firewalls were introduced in the void space. So we could reduce with this 15% of the materials, and in total we could reduce down 10% of the cost of this project, and could make the project as open as you can see it here, whereby you would move through the void spaces, and as in a dream you would actually see the cars moving around you on different levels, and having a transparency towards the public movements within the building. In that sense, this void space became the texture of the whole project. It became the internal texture of the way how you would move around the project and characterize the project in many different ways. In a way, it was for us also not purely a showroom, it was a museum. And we convinced also the client that if you go to the MoMA, for instance, and you look up and you see the helicopter hangar in the MoMA's foyer, if that is a product of a cultural object, why could not be the car be seen as a cultural object in this museum? So luckily enough with that, we were able to draw much more attention to a larger public going to this building. But maybe going back to the topic of work and working around this idea of the bigger details and the void space, and maybe the idea of how we could create a kind of form of social sustainability. This building in Stuttgart, also in the same location where the Mercedes is built, is dealing with this idea of social sustainability and what we call lately action design, whereby it is very difficult to find the elevator in this building. People have to use staircases. People would meet on the staircases. They will exchange knowledge on the staircases. They would socialize around the staircases. They could see wherever the different programs are through the staircase within this building. And through different techniques, we thought about the high amount of flexibility we wanted to create with these enormous amount of programmatic activities within the project, and studied in many ways how the program could be applied to quite an open system. So we had the central void space again, and around the void space we had these different fields for the laboratorium spaces and some of the office spaces. And the building in section is grouped around these laboratorium spaces. So this is what the client wanted. They wanted to use this project as a future building of how one would work in the future, connected to this idea of work. Meeting each other, seeing each other, that the central core became the wayfinder was very important, and that the building could always be changed and use different programs was very important. So you can see here the void space made it possible to always connect yourself towards the different layers of the project. Another aspect was to work with the vertical movement there where necessary, in such a way that they became the stabilizers of the project, and that we didn't need any columns in the project. So as long as we could, we tried to study the way how the cores could be placed in relationship to the methods of the programmatic flexibility, so that it would be easy to construct the whole project around these three cores. And make the building, as you can see here, quite transparent. The colors of the stair are related to on which floor you are, so that you would never lose your way when you are moving around the building and while you're not using the elevator. So mass, materiality and efficiency around a constant testing of moving forwards with the idea of the external texture of the building, and the internal texture was key to the way how we could bring this theme of future work together in this building. And not only on the social sustainable idea, but also on the full sustainable idea for the Fraunhofer Institute in Stuttgart. This was for them very important because it became a prototype for many office buildings they did in the future. You can see that the windows move in two directions in order to shut down the light and the heat coming down into the building. But this brings me to the smaller scale, even more smaller scale projects we do, the furniture. Like this is called the sit table. It's a very popular table, luckily enough now among startup companies. They love the table because you can sit in the table, but you can sit around the table. And it becomes almost like an architectural element. You can move from one office space to the next office space, because you don't need so much furniture with this project, because it's one furniture what can be generated for many different activities. So whenever you have a small meeting, or you have a lunch, or you have the client around, you can have a workshop around this table. And it's used now in many places, not only in office spaces, but also in libraries. And we do get these ideas from other projects, like this was a pavilion in Chicago we designed, with making these openings and these larger details again of carrying the structure. And maybe that connected itself towards many projects. So we move the larger details from one to another project in a serial manner, so that we bring these ideas together through the design of several projects, and bring through these ideas the knowledge together in these projects through these larger details. This is another home where the idea of working and living together is central in the design of the project, whereby in the upper part of the house and the lower part of the house you have different areas to work and live together in a family arrangement, like in the former house I showed you. And again, you can see the cantilevers. It's creating an enormous amount of flexibility within the organization of the ground floor area, only not because of the work and the living relationship on the ground floor, but also to have a connection to the view in the surroundings. You have a beautiful wine mountain on this side of the village, or this edge of the village near Stuttgart. And maybe a last project I would like to show you is a project designed in the center of Holland, where this mirrored facade creates in the central void space in a very important relationship between the people working in the building and the internal court. The internal court creates a kind of place for lunch, where people come together and where people look at whenever they are looking at the time of the building, because the colored facade, with this particular foil we introduced in this facade, is changing into almost 7 or 8 different colors. And whenever the light comes onto the facade, then it creates a colored shadow into the patio. So whenever it is lunchtime and you see a yellow color coming onto the ground of the courtyard in the building, then people love it. They say, oh gosh, it's yellow time or green time, you know, we can go for lunch. So you can see the effect here of how that works, and how, you know, over the time the project became a place for parties, or that it became a kind of meeting place for also reflecting maybe for a moment, not only with your members where you work with and exchange knowledge, but also to seclude yourself from the rest of the group and to be on your own. And even when there is not a sunny day there, it is as if you are always in a sunny day. But, you know, I have to be careful with how much I show you, because I can talk endlessly, as architects always can do. Maybe one of the other work environments of a project I was recently connected to is a project in Holland again, where this project can be turned from an office space layout into housing. And this is the latest discussion in Holland, because we have so many empty office buildings, and the amount of empty office buildings are growing so fast that the new value for creating these new office spaces is to be able to move into housing. And you can see the ground plan is quite fat and bold. So we had to bring in these courtyards within the project in order to bring the daylight as deep as possible into the project. And the skin of the facade, as you can see on the top, is much more closed down. And if you go to the lower part of the building, it's much more opening itself up to create more light in the building, but also to reduce down the heat load in the project on the top. So, you know, I think whenever we design houses or work environments where people can work at home, like again, or in an office building, and we know that today we work in so many places, we can work even around the corner if we want here, in order to do an hour architectural work if we want. Today the work environment is not anymore focused on the work space as we used to work in before. The future could be of workspace in a loft like this, where you have your art collection and you can, like this owner of this loft, works in the corner every day for at least 6 hours. So work is going to be as lively as possible in the future, and interesting as it is in different environments where we work with. Maybe the last final project I would like to show here in Singapore, whereby similarly this idea of working and living is introduced in a quite compact zone here on Atmore Road. So it's called Atmore Residence, and hope that you have time to visit the project. A place with the organic, beautiful landscape of Singapore. Whenever you know that, if you come from the airport and you drive into the city, it's almost like if you drive into a park with all these wonderful trees around you and bougainvilleas. And this organic quality of the facade is playing with that idea of the landscape of Singapore, and the way of how that landscape can grow into the lower parts of the buildings here in the city. And we like that idea. We like that idea that the articulation of the facade is playing with the idea of the landscape in a more planar, organized quality to be found in the city. The idea of how the building is working in its environment is as if it is fitting in the way of how it is connecting itself easy towards a project next to itself. But if you come closer, then you see the texture. So that was the idea, that it would be an amorphous project like I talked about before. It would create after images only when you come closer to the project. And it would create much more texture when you go even in the project. And for that we worked a lot with the idea of the heat load coming to the building, and that it would filter out the light, and that it would make it possible that you would not have too many heat coming into the apartments, and that you would not view down into the apartments of someone else. And the layout is quite simple, organized. It is having on the side core, it's having a vertical column system, and you have no columns in the middle, so you have a total open panorama towards the city. And in the middle you have the possibility to make a workspace again, or either have two guest rooms related to the master bedroom. And the building is so organized that everything what is related to the sunlight going over the building, it's protected on the side. So no sun load is going into the open side of the building, only on the edges, on the sides of the project. And as you can see, no columns used, but for this reason we could even work with glass fins to keep the panorama in the project very open. The building looks complex, but it is consisted out of few elements, and these elements are twisted and turned and mirrored in many different ways over the project. And here you can see this openness of a double-height balcony introduced in the side of the living space. And this is actually not a rendering, this is the real apartment. And then again, a total open view towards the city. And you can see how it works here. Double-height balconies connected to one apartment, and if you go on floor higher, then the next apartment is having the next double-height balcony. And that was introduced in order to catch all the wind coming into the apartment. So in the night, when you want, you could open your window, and then all the wind in a very soft manner comes into the apartment, related to a 24-hour life of working, sleeping and living in this environment of Singapore. Thank you very much.